All right. I'm refreshing it to make sure we're good.
Make sure we can actually hear ourselves. Here we are. Make sure we can actually hear ourselves. Here we
Uh-oh.
are. Make sure
Can I
we
hear
can actually hear
myself?
ourselves. Here we
Uh-oh.
are. Make sure
Can I
we
hear
can actually hear
myself?
ourselves. Can you? Here we
Uh-oh.
are.
Can I hear myself?
Yep, you're on there.
Can I hear
Yay, we
myself?
have sound you're on there. Time.
This this is so bizarre. You guys can hear me, but I can't hear myself. So this is
When I just listened to the, like, I unmuted on the Twitch channel, I could hear you.
okay.
I could hear you.
Okay.
So I'll check it again in a few, but we should be good.
Gotcha. Okay. That's
Sorry about that,
the most
everyone.
important thing. Yeah, I'm sorry for everyone that's kind of sitting here. It's not like we can go live and test these things out. And I was just telling Jess and Theresa that apparently the latest Microsoft update, they disabled audio settings, which like totally messed with everyone. And when I went and looked at the VOD, I thought it was Twitch last time, but yeah, the first like I think 15 minutes or so of our stream the last time we sat down with Claire and Holly was just muted. So that was a super bummer, but I was able to at least get some feedback mid session to fix it right away. So
Absolutely.
we have most of the session. So and then I'll try and recap what was said in the beginning so that way we can have a little bit, but we'll bring them back for a round two. So
Absolutely. So today I'm really excited because we have Theresa Fraser here. She's like one of the most amazing, humble people you'll ever meet. So she's gonna scoff at me when I say nice things.
I do, because I'm like, please don't say that. Please. I was like, please don't say that. Please don't say that. La 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 la.
But I want to say I genuinely feel that way, and I am not. I like to say I don't know that I like it, but I do say about myself that I'm not a very fluffy person. If I like something, I'm going to say it, and if I don't, I don't. And so the fact that I say that about you, it's just so heartfelt and genuine. And some of the exciting things, soon it's going to be Dr. Theresa Fraser, because you're
Ooh.
if I pass, if I actually can answer the questions.
You will. And really, so much of that is about your committee, because if you get in there and you weren't ready to answer those questions, then to me, that's a committee issue. So just take some deep breaths. If you feel like you have a good committee, then you will be solid when you get in there.
I have a really amazing advisor and at the University of South Wales, and she I said, okay, so anything else I should do? And she said, do you want to do a mock one? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. So we're gonna have a tea and a mock defense session, which I think is really kind of her. So
yeah, I think that's wonderful. So I'm super excited for you. And of course, you and I have a bunch of different projects that we're working on in the background. So just love all the crossovers. But today, Michael and I are thrilled to have you here because you have been one of the early supporters and people who understood the power of incorporating digital tools into therapy. And it was so amazing to me early on when a lot of people were naysaying that you were like, oh, but what about, we could use it here and there, and we could do this. And it was like, you could just see your brain exploding. And I'll tell you, on a personal level, that was so wonderful for me, because I had so many people being negative to me about the things that I was talking about and wondering. And to have someone who I respect so much like you say, ooh, look, think of all these places and people and situations and the different things we could do, and then being open to new things coming as well has been really amazing for me. So thank you for that. And so I'm hoping today we can talk a little bit about those perspectives and also some things that you've been doing in your work, and probably good to start off even letting our listeners know who you are, where you are, what you have going on.
Okay, well, like, thanks for inviting me. When I was invited, I was like, I don't feel like I have anything like expertise to add to the conversation, because you and Michael are really like leading the way in not only North America, but around the world. And so my name's Theresa. I'm a play therapist supervisor in Canada, and I originally was in the middle of the country. And then 5 years ago, my partner and I decided we bought a $22,000 house online. And and we were foster parents. So, and I was a professor and part-time therapist at the time. So I put all of our foster kids in the van and said, we're going to go to the beach for the summer. And we got here, the real estate agent gave me the keys and he was like, so what do you think? And I was like, wow, I think this is awesome. And he was like, well, there's no running water and there's no electricity and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, so it's like camping with a roof. This is awesome. So we finished it all off. And then about, not the next year, my husband came, and then we ended up buying another house. We bought this 4-bedroom Victoria house in this harbor town, and with the plan that we would retire here eventually. And then a year later, we were like, why are we waiting till retirement? That's crazy. Let's just go. So off we went. And life decisions take us in places we never think we're going to be. So I still get to do, I really miss teaching in a classroom, but of course, as we know with COVID, I'd been doing online work for about 7 years before COVID, doing teaching as well as working with primarily doing attachment work with adoptive families, because that was an area I was known for in Ontario where I lived. And then COVID hit and it was like, oh, I know how to do this. And a lot of people were like, we can't. I had many therapists, especially Santre therapists, going, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do my work. I was like, oh, we'll just move it online. So when you talked about, when you first started talking about the work you were doing with the virtual Santre, I was like, yeah, because I'd been doing online work. And yeah, when you started talking about it, I was thinking, think of all the places that therapists go where they can't bring tools, like, closed custody settings where, you get everything checked before you walk in and the cell door closes, right, for adolescents, or thinking about immigration camps, or just even being able to travel as a mobile therapist. And we talked about hospitals in those days too. And I know you've been doing lots of research around that. So I think any of those digital kind of resources, it is easy to say, well, we don't do it that way. But really what happens, the requirement of we have to do it this way because this is what we need to do. COVID taught us that. And at the beginning of COVID, I did an interview with you, and I don't think we ever aired it because we opted not to at that point. But I remember asking the questions. So it must feel kind of interesting to have all those people that were like, yo, you can't do this online. And now they're doing online work, right? Because we didn't have any other choice. And I think as a play therapist or just a child and family therapist, we have to be flexible with whatever the people that we're privileged to walk alongside of come to us with. Like, so if they can't use this tool, then what tool can they use? And your work in terms of not only the virtual Santre, but even teaching people how to use virtual reality. Wow. And the first time I was looking at virtual reality with Wander, and I'll tell people a personal experience, and I can do it now without crying, but I lost a sister very tragically, and she was, besides my husband, the closest person in the world to me. And the first time I put Wander on with my virtual reality, I went to my childhood home, and it was like it hits you viscerally. Like, I remember standing on that front porch and smelling the cherry blossoms of that tree that's blooming. Like, you have all of those somatic experiences. And I went to the front of the house where my sister lived before she died, and then went through the different years. And then she was standing right in front of me. And I mean, she was standing right in front of me. And I was like, wow. And I burst into tears. And my husband was like, what are you doing? Maybe you shouldn't be doing that. And I was like, no, it's okay. But it really made me realize this isn't just a toy. Like, this can have a really deep impact on people.
Because you feel it all through your body. It's not just what you're seeing,
no. It's a somatic, you're having a somatic experience. So as a trauma therapist, You know, and I do EMDR and I do brain spotting and incorporate that in my work too. The virtual reality stuff, you're right there. Like I agree with you. You are right there. So I realized just from having that personal experience, which when I did training with you and when I facilitate training in Santray, because I that's a real passion of mine as well. I say to people, we have to use the tools and know the power of the tools, and then also know the risks of the tools. Because if we don't know that, then we can't prepare people for the experience that may show up that they don't realize they're going to have.
And make proper therapeutic decisions
Exactly.
of what it is you're even going to have your client taken. And as you're saying, to be able to inform them, like even something as simple as say in virtual reality, when something's loading, it can get very dark sometimes. You know, it's like black, and sometimes it's not, but in some programs it, and so to know that ahead of time, because that might be very difficult for somebody, but that's knowing the tools, that's knowing the power, that's knowing where some things might pop up that might be important to address. It's all kinds of stuff. And just to explain to the audience, in case this is new to them, Wander is similar to Google Earth. So you go into the virtual reality headset, and it's a program that allows you to put in an address, a specific address anywhere in the world. You can also look at different landmarks. You can put random and then just show up somewhere in the world. But it basically it has taken the world and put it into a virtual experience in your headset that then you can visit. It also, as you were talking about, has different years, because the people who are familiar with Google Earth know that Google goes around taking pictures all over the world all the time. And so you can see over the years a progression of, like, for instance, the office I'm in right now, the earlier years shows it before I bought it, when it was sort of run down and a different color and all that stuff. And then as I go through the years and Wander, then it's like, oh, that's when they were fixing up the house. And you know, for when I purchased it and we were fixing it up, and there's the fence that's not there anymore. And then some subsequent years is, oh, there's the rose bush I planted, you know, whatever it might be. But over the years, and part of that really powerful experience that you had and that you were describing is that in one of those years, when they were going around taking the pictures, your sister happened to be there.
Yeah.
And
so standing on the street.
So there she was right in front of you when you went in there. Now, in a clinical,
that was my first experience. It was like, wow. And not everybody's going to have that experience. You're not going to see a place with people. But I mean, the versatility of that program, not only for therapy, I think of during COVID for homeschooling, you know, when my son was doing a project on France, I was like, okay, let's go look at the Eiffel Tower and let's go look at what the Louvre looks like outside. Or, you know, there's other programs in Oculus, as people know, like the Anne Frank Museum, where you can walk around the house that is described in her book. So there's so many programs in virtual reality that make travel accessible. But absolutely, it isn't just like looking at a picture.
Yeah. And you think for people who have any sort of mobility concerns, or maybe even people who are at the end of their lives and they're like, I regret that I never got to go visit the pyramids in Egypt. Like, the reality that person probably at the end of their life, they're probably not going to physically go there, but they could go in the headset and they could experience a form of that. And that, as you were saying, you know, with that somatic and visceral responses to that, could be really amazing for that person.
Yeah.
So there are all different areas.
Well, and then also for that population, I've recommended with families I've worked with with the person that was dying, to be able to, the grandchildren, to go visit the childhood home. Right now, it's not going to look the same as it was because Google Earth wasn't operating at that time, but at least they could get a sense of the place. Last week, I was recommending to a mom, because they do have virtual reality at home and the child's going to a new school. And I said, have you got, like, you would think that, like, have you gone to the school? No, we're going to go Tuesday. Oh, well, maybe because your child has anxiety, it might be good to go visit ahead of time. And the
Yeah.
mom was like, well, I don't have a car this weekend. I was like, well, that's okay. Use your headset, like go in and
Right.
walk from your house to the school and walk around the building as far as the Google car will go. So you're doing a little bit of exposure work and desensitization,
Absolutely.
or getting them excited about going to this
I
new
have a
place.
client whose parents recently divorced, and we went in to see the other parents' new home and town
Right.
and all of that. So we're just talking about one program.
That's
but
just
looking
one
at
program, but,
all
and
the
I've used
different
that
pieces.
program. I have some other kiddos that that I'm working with who have moved from another province, and they're now in foster care. And I'm doing an assessment, and I said, would you like to show me your old home? And they're like, yeah. So next week we're planning to again do that, show me their old home. So we're honoring the place where they grew up and where they were when it's in a different place, and we wouldn't normally be able to go look at that.
Absolutely.
That's pretty important for kiddos who haven't maybe felt like their story's been heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a different experience. There's an importance to me verbally explaining to you something or someplace. There's an importance to that. So we're not saying that's less than in any way, but it's different. So if
Yeah.
I explain it to you, then I'm thinking in my mind, I'm conjuring up memories, and I'm turning those into words to be able to express them to you. You're
Right.
then turning my words into some sort of an imagination in your mind, and they may or may not match up very well. It might
Exactly.
be that what you envision isn't anywhere close to what I have in my head and what I remember, but we can still have a very powerful exchange about that. And really the importance in that exchange is what you understand that means to me, and also how that might fit into my narrative in some way.
Right.
But if you can then have the additional piece of actually being able to be there, air quotes, be there together in that same space. And I've had kids say, oh, and over here is where my best friend lived, and over here is where I used to play blah, 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 and over here is where this thing happened, that might be traumatic. And they've been able to, we don't have to have the translation into verbal and then back into pictures in each of our minds, and the interpretation of that. We can just be there and then go from there in the whole process. And
Yep.
So it's not saying that other traditional means aren't important in this. There can be great value in that. It's in addition to that, we can have some really powerful experiences and both actually be looking at the same thing at the same time. Because in Wander, you can be, if you have two headsets,
Yeah.
if you're working virtually and each person has a headset, or you're in the same physical space, then you can each be in the Wander together. You can join together, and you can see each other's little icons and point and do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Or if you only have one and you're in the same physical space, you can cast it so that someone watch.
So you cast it on the phone, which is really important for me as a therapist to do, to know in case someone, so that's good for audience members to think about, to figure out, how do I cast it if you only have one headset to your phone or a screen, so you know where they're going and can journey alongside with them by talking. It's just
journey. And then also, if they're struggling in some way, like I'll have kids who are playing Job Simulator and they're like, I can't pick it up, or whatever it might be, I can guide them because I can see on a 2D screen, I can see what it is they're doing. One of our
I'm laughing about that game because the first time you introduced me to that game and I tried it, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Oh my gosh. I would be going, I was working last year in an Indigenous community in their school, and the kids would meet me at the door, because then of course they start talking to each other, and they're like, are you the VR lady? And I was like, yep, but really it's the kids that are helping you. But if they had a choice of picking a program they were going to use, hands down, Job Simulator. I was hearing that over and over, not just from kids, from teachers too. They were going, what is this job thing you're doing with the kids? I was, because they were like, we thought you were a mental health therapist. And I was like, yep, I am. But they were picking that, and it gives them a sense of competency and efficacy and curiosity and failing, right? And they were like, yeah, like that's really kind of cool. Anyway.
Yeah, I know it is. It's funny because I think Michael, I think you and I were talking at one point about like having play registers. Did we have a whole conversation about having play registers at one point? And like, I can't remember, but I walked away with the funny idea anyway, that we have this, that included in our play when we're young in particular, but I mean, it could be at any point, is the tendency to play things that for adults feel like work. So like we're playing with a cash register, and pretending that we're working at a store. And then when you're an adult, you're like, I'm working, I don't want to go to work, or whatever it might be. But as a kid, going through that, those life skills, those the experience of that, the time management, the listening to the boss that comes and says, and whether you listen to it or not, are they throwing stuff at the bot, or are they complying, or which jobs are they choosing? Do they destroy stuff in there? Do they keep everything there's just so many different directions you can go in. But it's just kind of funny to think one of the powerful programs for in therapy uses is simulating jobs work.
And it aligns with the therapeutic powers of play under increases personal strengths, right? Like you're
Absolutely.
practicing something. Yeah.
Direct to indirect teaching, stress inoculation, stress management. Like there are a bunch of them in there that I think
it's just really cool. Very cool.
I wanted to throw in a quick thing for you too. I noticed, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but they have, you were talking about like casting to your phone recently, looking through some stuff. Cause I look at people showing, some guy was showing how he plays like mini golf, on VR. And so I was like, wow, but like, how do you record what you're seeing in the VR, but also your physical body experience, right? As opposed to just recording the casting on the phone. So just seeing what they're seeing. And the guy, if you guys are interested, or if you already know about it, great. But I recently found it. He looked in. I could put it in the description for this, but there's an app that you can put on your phone that records over, so you actually see the physical body person on top of what they're actually casting. So I could actually see this guy like recording himself doing mini golf and recording himself painting and things like that. So I think of like, when you were talking about like being able to look at a previous home, but also to see their like body reaction, to like, because we'll remember it in the moment, but sometimes that could be real powerful for them to see the the body experience that they had, or some sort of shift in their behavior change,
and of course with proper assent and whatnot, but also for caregivers to see that too. In some situations, not always, but in some situations that might be valuable too. So there are a few different ways to do split screen for sure. And if you have an iPhone, there have been some in one of the most recent updates. So there have been ways incorporated to do split screen recording, and then even I believe within the Oculus, if you're using an Oculus, within the Oculus app as well. I saw something. I work out to a program called Supernatural, and in there they talk a lot about those split screen recordings, and someone in there said that something in the Oculus app allows you to do that as well. So what I would recommend is that if people want to do that, certainly Michael's going to put that link in the chat for people, but if you Google split screen recording plus whatever hardware you have, so plus Google Pixel 6 or iPhone, whatever device you're using, plus VR or Oculus, then you should come up with a few different options of what you can do. But you want to look up split screen recording. That would be the key.
Never even thought of that. So I've learned something new today that I have to research. Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because then depending on how they have the camera, you know, you can potentially see their whole body while they're doing the VR, plus
Wow.
what is they're actually seeing. And it's just two halves of the screen. One is the person and one is what they're seeing. And so the movement of the person aligns with the view. And actually, I think can be a little easier to watch than just recording the screen of what they're
Right.
watching, because sometimes when you're in VR, you're moving your head all over the place, and that can make somebody watching it feel a little woozy.
Busy. Yeah.
Yeah. So to see the action of the head go along with the action of the movement of the screen actually, I think, aligns in our vestibular a little bit better than just watching the 2D version of
Hmm.
the headset. But yeah, um, I want to not um, take up all the time with one topic, even though we could talk about that for hours, I'm certain. I know that you're doing a lot of exciting things in neurobiofeedback, and I was hoping that you would be willing to share some of that with us and what your experiences have been.
Sure. Well, first I want, but before I forget, I want to go back to the power of the parents seeing what's happening,
Mhm.
because one of our kids has he's got a few challenges going on in his world, and because we were mirroring watching what he was doing on the television in the VR, it gave my partner lots of great insight into why he misses so much in his environment, because he's constantly doing this all the time. But he's not moving his eyes, he's moving his whole head, which
Mhm.
help my husband understand, oh, this is something that can get in the way for him in the classroom. And we wouldn't have known it otherwise. So I think that's real. It was a real gift to see that. So I wanted to share that personal experience.
and and it's a combination, right? It's a combination of not only having the VR there and the programs available for him to use, but it's also the awareness
Yes.
from your husband, within your husband, to be paying attention to that instead
Yeah.
of, and to me that segues into the whole conversation and a bunch of what we talked about last time with Holly and Claire of the co-play and the importance of it's not something, I mean, certainly we all have our own independent time and independent play. So I'm not saying that parents or caregivers have to be with their kids doing these things 20, you know, what, however many time, whatever section of
But there's a
time.
big benefit to being there and learn
But
and
being part of it,
yeah,
yeah,
co-experiencing it. Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely, is huge. And on top of it, then that awareness that your husband had to not only look and go, oh, that's so cool what you're doing, and I'm here and I'm witnessing it, but also, oh, that is giving me a lot of insight into
Yeah.
how this child experiences the world.
Yes, exactly. So, and that it was a game changer for us in terms of helping him, but also advocating for him in terms of the support he needs in the classroom. So I thought I didn't want to lose that. And then in
No.
terms of, so I think about how digital, I'm the least digital person you can imagine too. I have to say this. Like previous jobs, I wasn't allowed in the photocopier room because I go anywhere near it and it stops working. And I went once to this breakfast that a writer's breakfast that my dad would go to. And I sat at the table with other people he worked with. And I was saying, yeah, I really, and they started laughing. And I'm like, why are you guys laughing? And they said, well, my dad was in charge of computer systems for Goodyear in Canada, but he was never allowed near the mainframe room. In those days, they had big mainframe computers because whenever he would go by, things would stop working. So my partner always says, you're like from another dimension or something. And actually, my dad has a disease that Irish people carry that has a lot of he has to get his blood let regularly because he has a lot of he's got something in his blood that makes electronic stuff not work the way it's supposed to. And I always think I must be a carrier. So my kids tease me about that too. They're like, yeah, don't let mom touch the remote. And so it's kind of ironic that I'm trying to use all these things in my practice, because I think it's really important that we always have to look at what's the world of those that we're working with, and then how do we get segues into that to understand where they're coming from? So virtual reality is one of those for sure. And then neurofeedback's another one. And again, that came into my practice personally because this little guy we had, after we did an assessment, the OT and the psychologist said he probably needs neurofeedback. And I was like, now I live in the other end of Canada now in the Maritime, so north of Massachusetts, Maine, and it's very rural. Like there's the major center is an hour and a half away. So I said to a psychologist, okay, so where do I get that? And she was like, oh, you have to drive to Fredericton, which is like 5 hours away, 6 hours away. And to do that every weekend wasn't going to happen. And I was like, I just can't do that when I have other kids in the family. And she said, well, I said, can I buy one of these machines? And she was like, well, you have to be a master's level clinician. And I was like, well, I am. And she was like, oh, yes, you are. Okay. So there's two types of neurofeedback. One is non-linear and one is linear. And the one we have is a linear one intentionally. It's called Neuroptimal. It's sold all over the world. And you don't have to program it. Once there's pieces that you attach to the ears that kind of monitor heart rate and brain waves. It's not those things aren't changing brain waves. Those things are recording and kind of getting responses on how your brain is reacting to what's going into your brain. So you listen to music that's pre-programmed. I always tease clients and say, we're going to hook you up to the mothership, because it's kind of like that. It's like the machine is hooked up to a main server for this company and they adapt the music. I don't have to program it based on the brain waves that they're recording and tracking. So it sounds really wackadoodle, folks. I know it does. But I started using it with my son. So this kid has experienced complex trauma before we got him. And the kid didn't sleep like 3-4 hours a night, maybe. And he's like a cat. Like if you'd walk past his door, he was up. So he wasn't hitting REM. And then he had experienced lots of other somatic things. So I was like, okay, sleep for me is really worth it. I guess we need to get a machine and it'll be good for him. It wasn't cheap and because it went from American dollars to Canadian dollars, but they let us pay for it over time. And we started using neurofeedback with him probably 3 times a week at first. And then now at least it's once a week. Whenever he's really agitated, I'm like, we need to get this into our routine. So Sundays are when we do neurofeedback now. And it just kind of calms the regulatory system down. It's kind of, I use Safe and Sound Protocol too. That's Stephen Porges' work. It's the audio program that you log into and get. So there's similarities, but it's neurofeedback is tracking your responses. So I have, it's not, there are clinicians that are using neurofeedback and charging for neurofeedback. Again, because I live in a poor area, I'm looking at as a client benefit tool. So what I often will do is I will do a session with the child, and then I have the parent in another room doing neurofeedback.
Yeah.
So they're calm and regulated so they can help regulate the child. If kiddos can sit, the session's about 33 minutes. So if they can sit for the 33 minutes, then, I'll do neurofeedback with them as well. And then I have some families that they'll rent the machine home for a month and everybody in the family will use it. So I now have 2 systems. One I rent out to people and one I use in my practice, and we use it at home as well. And it just kind of aligns with all we're learning more about how the brain works and holistically how we are as human beings. I just find the feedback that I get from people is they feel like they're sleeping better, they're more calm, they're more regulated, they're less impulsive, less reactive. And for me, that really primes people for therapy too, especially if we're going to be doing trauma work and there's the potential that they have some high somatic reactions. This kind of can calm the system down before they get there. So so I walk around with my neurofeedback machine in a case. But there are also non-linear ones that you can program, and so my machine cost about 9,000 American, and it gets prorated from the company over 2 years. But there are other machines that are sold that you do program. And of course, the people that use those machines are like, oh, this machine's better. And maybe they are. Mine works for what I want to use it for. But the other ones are like, they can be up to $30,000. So it's not a cheap resource for sure.
Right.
But
What do you what are you noticing / what do you think the parents are noticing, both in themselves when they're doing it and also in their children?
Well, what you're listening, the music, there's different types of music. And then also though, there's sometimes you can put television shows on a stick for kids who can't listen to music necessarily. And what they hear when they're listening with the headsets is blips and bops. So there's pauses and blips and bops. And then when you're, the tracking pieces like the clip and then the sensor on the brain, that's tracking how quickly do you notice the blips and bops. And then there's this other thing, and I can't explain the science behind this, but there's a thing they call on the machine called a mirror matrix. And then there's lines, which is basically it's sensing which parts of your brain are reacting to the music. And a line
That was going to be my next question, is what parts of the brain that I was going to
well, it has all numbers, and it goes like this. And I again, I should know exactly what each line does, and I don't, because I've never really needed to. But I did have one client, he's 9 years old, and he said, Theresa, watch what I can do. And his mom's a doctor, and she was sitting in the room because he'll do neurofeedback and I'm doing parent consultation at the same time because he can't hear. And mom's a doctor. I was a little like intimidated by that. I was like, okay, I have a doctor in the room, and what if she asked me what line 15 is and I can't come up with that right away? Like, we all have that. Anyway, he said, Theresa, watch what I can do. And he focused and the lines were all in the box. And then he said, now look. And then they went like that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And of course, Dr. Mom says, Theresa, what does that mean? And I was like, what do you think that means? And she said, I think he can focus a lot better than he lets on. And I said, I think you're right, because he can. Well, he focused. That's the whole point of it.
Of a neurofeedback loop, is that, I mean, even if we're in like a VR program, there's one where there's a tree that, depending on how your breath is, if it's regulated and you're breathing well, that sounds like a weird thing to say, but like if you're not dysregulated and your heart rate is up and all of that, then the tree has all its leaves and it's nice and full, and it is, but if you're not, then it isn't. And so,
and that's right, that's feedback. Well, and that's exactly it.
It's giving you that feedback loop that when I breathe like this happens, when I breathe like this happens. And that's what that kid figured out. He figured out, when I do this, it's in the range, and when I don't, it's not. And
he's the only one. And I've talked to other people, like, have you seen people do that? And they're like, no. And I'm like, this kid's so gifted. He is so interesting. But yeah, like it really is. It helps with, people report that it helps with sleep. It helps with focus. They just feel kind of calmer and more grounded in their bodies. Stephen Porges, Gabor Mate, all of those folks talk about the benefit of, safe and sound protocol, neurofeedback, EMDR, brain spotting, all those, all tools that I have in my toolbox. But I really kind of go with, what does the person think? And do they feel like, if they feel like it's helping them, great. And if it isn't, then, that's okay too. Yeah, I haven't had anybody say, I haven't had one person say, oh, okay, whatever. I present it as, if anything, it's 33 minutes of mindfulness and, relaxation. Right. And we all can benefit from that. I find when I do it, within 5 minutes, I'm sleeping. I had a mom this week who was like, could I try that? And I was like, sure. So I have a really comfy couch in my office. So all of a sudden, within 5 minutes, she's snoring. and I'm monitoring the sand tray because her son is I'm witnessing her son's sand tray. And he was like, my mom doesn't usually sleep like that. And I was like, oh, she must feel really relaxed. I said, we have to feel safe to be able to sleep. Like, if we don't feel safe, we don't actually allow ourselves to rest and sleep. And he was like, yeah, I feel that way here too. And I was like, oh, that's like so nice. So yeah, that's how I incorporate that in.
We had a question in the chat. Have you incorporated neurofeedback and digital play therapy? If so, how?
Great question. I haven't done them at the same time, because I'll often say to people when they're doing neurofeedback, even though there's other people that will say, oh, sure, you can look on your screen. I've just said, if you're doing neurofeedback, if you want to be touching the sand, like kids will make sand trays with their hands, or adults while they're doing neurofeedback, but I haven't had them looking at any kind of screen while they're doing neurofeedback, just because there is a screen with it, and most people don't even feel the need to look at, the lines going around, or they have another screen with psychedelic stuff moving, just because, yeah, I mean, we're focusing. I mean, how many electronics can you have connected to your body at once?
I think it would be interesting, though, to look at the differences. Like, for somebody who is there a report, or is there some sort of data that it collects that you can then at
No,
later?
they have, it's more of like like, I'm sure on some neurofeedback machines there are, and I'm sure nonlinear neurofeedback folks will say, absolutely, we have that data. For my system, it's all do pre and post screening, like at the beginning of when you started neurofeedback to now, what are the differences?
Mhm.
Yeah. And
I
I
think
just
it's
look
a
more on qualitative, what the person says, how they're feeling. Sorry,
Go ahead,
Michael.
Leslie.
Oh no, I was just gonna throw in a thing there. It's really interesting because it makes me think more about how a lot of things are moving towards like wearable health devices, and we
Mhm.
know that Apple is coming out with their headset here pretty soon, although it's going to be extremely expensive, rumored to be like $2,000 to $3,500.
Mhm.
But with how much Apple focuses heavily on wearable devices, and I've been reading a lot of research studies about putting, like Jess was saying, putting breathing measures and things like that on the screen while they're doing things, so that they can get like real-time visualization. And
And
as
feedback.
yeah, as you were talking about, was really interesting to me too, was also just thinking about how it wasn't until I was playing games that I actually started recognizing my own breathing in certain situations. Like played so many sports and everything growing up, weird and interesting life, but never paid attention to that, kind of breathing stuff until I was a teenager playing and being in all these different situations, and it was really interesting.
I am very interested in the Apple headset when it comes out, but yeah, there are a lot of things that I mean, the HP Omnicept has different biomarkers that are built in as well, but the wearables certainly um, do allow us to understand more what we're doing, maybe even why we're doing it, what impact it's having on us, on our breathing, on our heart rate, on in some situations looking at eye gaze and what we attend to, kind of like what you were talking about with your
Mm-hmm.
son. And then it's like, well, what do we learn from that information, and where do we take it from there once we've understood that? And for some of it, we take it internally, right? We think, okay, if I breathe this way, this happens. If I breathe this way, that happens. There are different things. The kid with the screen, understanding when he does certain things, how that impacts what's happening in that little screen. But I think it's also, as professionals, figuring out what some of the impact is on our clients. And that's why I was thinking it would be really interesting, along with the question in the chat, of some sort of comparison of what does show up differently. Certainly it
Yeah.
doesn't have all the same biomarkers and whatnot you might get somewhere else, but even just how does interacting with some type of digital play alter or not? It just would be interesting. And then in that, though, I think it would have to be done very carefully for a number of reasons. Carefully in terms of what your goals are, therapeutic goals are for the neurofeedback in the first place.
Yeah.
Certainly what's going on with the client, but also in what you choose. Like, are you choosing, they really, really, really love to play Mario Kart, and that just makes them so happy, and so they're playing Mario Kart during it, might give you very different responses than if you
Yeah.
say, here, play this whatever. I don't want to insult any program out there, so I won't name one, but like some program that they don't want to play, that isn't interesting to them, isn't something that have passion for. Like, we also have to be very careful in how we compare things too. And if we were going to look at something like that, because so I'm mostly saying that because if someone's like, oh, that's a really good idea, I think I'm going to do a study on that. Well, just make sure that you're attending to a screen is not a screen is not a screen. There, it's not equivalent. Different programs are not equivalent. Different platforms are not equivalent. So, and different people aren't. So,
And what's your therapeutic goal? And then does the program fit with also the social location of the little person? I work with lots of kids from a few First Nation communities. And it was really important, just like in the sand tray room, to have symbols and images that are culturally respectful and represent what they know. In the VR world, it was the same thing. So the fishing program is a really important program for kids I work with from those communities.
Yeah.
Because fishing is part of what elders have taught them. So they will go to the fishing program and go, oh, I want to see this. And I think to someone else, they might just go, oh, you have a fishing program that you're using in therapy. But for him, for some of those kids, it's really important that is on the list of things that we might be doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So part of what we're speaking to is the importance, as you said earlier in our discussion, the importance of understanding the programs. And as I've said before, it's not just we're in this case talking about virtual reality, but it could be a Nintendo Switch
program.
It could be something on a tablet. It could be on a computer, Xbox, whatever. I don't care. That it's not just about doing this cool thing in therapy. Oh, you're the VR therapist. It's as I also always say, it's knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that there's an intentionality to that. It makes me think of the distinction that people have been, I don't know, going back and forth about for years is, and we know Dr. Charles Schaefer spent quite a bit of his career there in the last 10, 20 years trying to differentiate between, quote, just play and play therapy and therapeutic play. And what are the differences? What are the nuances in there? And how does that show up when we're using digital tools is a really important piece of all of this.
Yeah. And no more, like even more important in the last few years because of COVID, when we haven't worked with people necessarily when we're in the same physical space, but we're in a virtual space with each other. And
COVID opened that up more. I mean, we know that it was in existence before. You were doing it before. Other people were doing it beforehand, but
quietly. I wasn't advertising, I have to tell you. Because I know people are like, what? You're doing what? Yeah.
But the thing is that now that it's much more mainstream, I think the other thing that's happening, at least here in the US, I'm not really sure all the rules in Canada for like licensure and whatnot, but here in the US, traditionally, you get licensed in a state and you can see people in that state. And you might go through the process of having multiple licensures in multiple states, so that you could potentially do some other form of therapy with them or something. But for the most part, you're licensed in one state. And now, because of the expansions, I've spoken before in here about SciPact here in the US that allows me, I think I'm up to 33 states that I'm licensed in through SciPact, and then I'm independently licensed in another one. So what that means to me, between that and then the expansion of telehealth and all the tools that we have now and the ways we can work together, much of that through digital means, that there are clients who come to me specifically because I have the expertise I have, and the hope is that expertise fits well with what that client's needs are and who that client is. And a lot of times I get referrals of people saying, we have been to so many therapists and we're hoping that you'll be a good fit. And I'm seeing people now who I've been seeing for longer than they've ever seen any other therapist, because there was something about us that was a really good fit. And how fantastic is it that now they can access the
Yeah.
services that match for them?
Absolutely.
And even for myself, like I've had some needs that in my little rural area, we just didn't have. And now I can access those needs elsewhere because all of this is much more mainstream. And we're recognizing, I think, as humans, that there are a number of services, conversations, connections, whatever they might be, that don't necessarily have to be in the same physical space in order for there to be value. And
Absolutely.
that's huge.
Yeah. We're in the same in Canada that, yeah, I'm licensed in 3, we call them provinces. And then we have some provinces that are working towards licensure. So I can see clients in those communities as well. But yeah, initially, like, 2013, 2014, when I was doing work with people in other parts of the province I was in, because of my expertise, yeah, there wasn't, that wasn't happening as much as it is now. And I think it's really great that now we have more people. It isn't just the clients, but the therapists now, have done training and have done practice and are now more open. And there's many therapists that don't even have bricks and mortar offices anymore.
Right.
Like they're just in a virtual office, and that's all the work that they see. From a student point of view, because I live in an area where it took a while for the health authority, that was the publicly funded organization, to do virtual work or phone calls with people. And so it was taking a while for things to kick in. So I have students that are doing their master's level internships, and they can do work anywhere in the province with people for free. Doesn't cost anyway. So we were one of the first programs to do pro bono work. And I wasn't as worried because I didn't have to be in the physical space with them. And if they felt unsafe, they can just say, I have to go, and turn the camera off.
Right.
So they're not putting themselves at risk. So that's been another big positive too.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Well, just like I said in the beginning, we were going to have more to say than we're going to have time, which means, of course, we're going to have to ask you back.
Oh, that's kind. I just really appreciate the work that both of you are doing, because the more discussions and conversations that happen, the more open not only service providers are, but clients, and then government bodies are, to looking at supporting people in different ways. And we have to learn and grow. Otherwise, we're not meeting the needs of the people that we're privileged to walk alongside of.
Thank you for saying that.
That is the perfect thing to end on. I won't even ruin it by blabbing on. So thank you so much, Theresa.
Thanks for the invitation,
yes,
guys.
And we will be asking you back again so we can continue this. Good luck with your defense. I think
I'll let you know.
Quick.
I've announced it to everybody, so if it doesn't work, you're all going to know just as much as you will if it does. It's been a fun ride anyway. Okay, take good care. Bye.
Thank you.